Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining this week. We're really excited to be here. I'm excited to have Andreina and Nicole joining me. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that's dear to my heart, which is continuing education, not just in the Pilates world, but also other disciplines that we can bring in. And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation to really think about where you are right now as a practitioner. Maybe you're just coming into this, you're in your first teacher training. I saw a couple of names go by of people that I think are in our current winter cohort of the comprehensive course, some names that I recognized. And I also saw some names as they're scrolling by of people who have been Pilates teachers for quite a long time. I guess 30 years fits into the long time category. I've been a Pilates teacher for 30 years, but I still feel like sometimes I just, over just maybe the last couple of years have I really figured it out and know what I'm talking about. So I'm hoping that you guys will really enjoy this conversation. So I would like for my guests today, Andreina and Nicole, to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background of where they've come from in their education and their movement training and some of the other influences that they've had. Andreina, would you like to start and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andreina, what all my friends call me Andre. I have a background in business. I have an MBA, and for 12 years, I was doing business development and franchise operations. And in 2016, my mom decided to open up a Pilates studio here in Miami, and I went through Polestar's training. And after that, I quit my job and started working for Polestar as an instructor, studio manager, and now running the operations for education domestically and internationally. So throughout those years with Polestar, I've also started helping in getting trained as a mentor. So I'm a little bit of both. I teach classes, I mentor students, and I get to use my business brain in the middle of all that.
That's great. I love when those can all weave together. And I'm just curious, how many of you, we often use the term career changer. So like Andre, you were in the business world and then came to Pilates. And I was definitely not. I was a dancer who had an injury and got to Pilates that way. But I'm curious, put in the chat if you happen to be coming from and have had a career in another very different profession, like accounting or business, or we have a lot of attorneys who decide that they want to be. So I'd be curious to see who's listening to some of the different backgrounds. All right, good. Oh, and a school teacher, elementary school teacher. Cool. Good. Well, Nicole, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
So, hi, I'm Nicole Raglin. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I'm also an educator here. I have two studios, one downtown Austin and one in Round Rock. My background is that I've been in movement and fitness and Pilates for close to 20 years. 2 decades, I just call it. It's easier, right? It's like 2 decades, 2003, and here we are, 2023. So my story is a little different. I was a young mom, had 2 boys, and basically was just working out at the local Y in Corpus Christi. Pilates was fairly new then, started taking a few mat classes and got recruited by the director to teach mat. So I was like, all right, I'll do this workshop, whatever this is. So next thing you know, I'm with this large group of people teaching mat out of, I think, the Brooke Seiler book, not really knowing what I was doing. But anyway, so fast forward during that time, had the opportunity to attend several different trainings through Physical Mind, PHI. At the time in Corpus, we didn't really have any schools. Pilates wasn't there. So I wasn't really familiar with much of any of the schooling out there. I did go through my NASM personal training as well as a lot of group fitness. So I was really proficient in fitness. Fitness was my thing. Great with groups, great with fitness. And then over time, I was introduced to Balanced Body and went through their comprehensive program, which was wonderful. Opened 2 studios in Corpus. And mainly focus a lot on the group fitness aspect. A lot of, let's just call it like 5 to 6 people in a group, which I loved so much. But it came to a point where I just felt, I felt like I really knew the what, and I knew how. I had the booklets, I had the exercises, but I started to get this deeper desire of like, I really want to understand the why. And I was searching. I call myself like a CEU queen. I love continuing education. I love to learn. And so I started seeking out different opportunities, found Pilates on tour, the Rehab Summit, and attended several of those. And I believe it was in 2018, went to one in Phoenix. And I remember signing up for an OOF course. It was, I think, relatively new then. And I walked in, and the instructor had this beautiful, she was just very well poised and very eloquent. And she had this Polestar shirt on. I said, what is Polestar? What is that? Right. And so I had the opportunity through that day to attend several other workshops, all with the Polestar instructors and educators. And had the opportunity to have lunch with them and just ask, like, okay, what is this Polestar? I'm just so curious. I have to know. And it's this intuitiveness of like, I feel like I need more, and I felt very connected to these ladies. And so they told me about the transition program, the bridging program. Literally, like, I think the next day when I got home from the workshop, I reached out to my Len. I was like, I don't know what this transition thing is, but I need to go. So 2 months later, I end up in Miami. And that's where I met you, Shelly. And ever since then, it's just been life-changing. Since then, I've moved to Austin. I downsized from my large studio to a smaller, like private and duet and small groups. And I'm really just so happy I did, just because I'm getting more and more people coming to me with the pre and post rehab that have the special needs. And I feel like Polestar was like the missing link. Like that's what I needed to help me grow in my practice, my confidence, and help me really know, not that we ever know that we know, but to know more than I knew. So, and additionally, I'll say the mentorship, the connections I've created, met some of my best friends, Ruth, and I've had my mentors in Dallas, Marie and Betsy, and everybody's just been so amazingly supportive and allowed me as a instructor, as a business owner, as a coach to grow within myself, but also offer my clients what they need. So, yeah.
That's great. And you can tell Nicole and Andre have no enthusiasm for this at all, right? I wanted to just read off a couple of the responses, because some of the responses only came to us of your backgrounds, and I think it's really cool. And I have to say, Len, thanks for joining, Len. Len and I go back a number of years, and he calls Pilates his encore career. I think that's fantastic. I don't know which ones you guys can see and not. We have a couple of pharmacists. We have people in manufacturing. We have a welder. I love that. Flight attendants.
Nice.
All kinds of different cool professions, attorneys, a couple of teachers. I'm seeing teachers there. What else? There might be, yes, dancers. I see a couple people from the dance world. And that was when I was coming in. That was where a lot of my mentors were from. I mean, the Elizabeth Larkham, that's, who I first studied with Brent. And so many of the people were coming from the dance world. And I think it's really exciting that over the last, 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years, we really are seeing a more diverse background, with people coming in from all these different places, which I think is really interesting. And I love the draw. And as you mentioned, Nicole, this idea of how we're supporting one another. And I think because a lot of Pilates teachers came to Pilates without maybe a business background or a business mentor, it's kind of hard to just know what to do to start a business. So the fact that we have people in the profession that can mentor us, and we've done this in in the PMA. We've had some mentoring sessions, and I think it's been a really nice way to go. So thank you for that, and everybody that put your professions in there. I think that's fun. I want to talk a little bit about, and as we were kind of prepping and talking about this idea that Brent often talks about of novice to expert. And both Nicole and Andre had some really kind of funny things to say about it, which I want them to share. Because in the beginning, obviously, at some point, we are beginners at whatever new thing that we're going to do. And certainly, if we're in a similar type profession, so if you're in, Pilates and you go to yoga, or you're in yoga and you go into martial arts, or, they all have some similar components. You go into gyrotonic or Feldenkrais. We're somewhat speaking the same language. We have some of those, we're not starting those next pieces as absolute beginners because we already have some movement background. And Brent will often tell some of our new grads, he actually says this at the exam if he's ever there, and we have a video that the students get to see, and he'll say, okay, now you've graduated, you've done this year-long training, and you are an advanced beginner. And you can see the whole room goes, what? I am? And so I'd like both Andre and Nicole to speak to that a little bit. And advanced beginner is not a bad place to be because there are huge amounts of opportunity ahead of you. But Andre, share your thoughts on that.
Yes. So I vividly remember being at the studio the day of my exam, like super proud of everything that I had done. I had finally sat for the exam. I finished. And then Brent was there and he was giving his lecture on, okay, this is where you are still an apprentice. And I'm going like, what? A year of training and everything that I've done to get here, you're telling me that I'm not ready? I feel like I've conquered the world. I'm going to be the best Pilates instructor. I'm ready to take on the very complicated cases. And fast forward, how many years has it been? Like 5. I now laugh because now I understand where he's coming from, right? Like, okay, that made total sense. I think even a month after graduation, when you're actually teaching, right? You start teaching in group, or somebody comes in, a new private client, and you're like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing, or let me go ahead and do my screening. And you're like, like now I get it. But it's funny. Like I had that shock when I heard the words, but now I understand where they're coming from. And I'm actually glad that it put into perspective how little I knew and how much more is to come. And so yeah, that was my
your aha moment.
My experience. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I had no idea what I was doing.
Nicole, what was your experience when you graduated your first time?
So definitely the same. I felt like I had the book. I knew what to do. I had the recipe. I had this like all these ingredients. I'm like, great. Here I am, right? But then here comes that one person that's just having some type of knee injury or shoulder injury, and you're thinking, okay, let me see if I can remember back to what I learned. Or maybe perhaps it's not even something that's a physical thing. That's what I appreciate a lot about the advanced assessment course that I took last year with Brent, was that, when we see the body come in, we often just see them biomechanically as, movement, but we don't realize like there's this whole person around them that's coming in as well. It's their belief system. It's, maybe they've had trauma, or maybe they're not getting any sleep, or, there's so much more to the body, to the being, to the person. And maybe in our mind, like what we've planned out for them, they come in completely with a different need that day. And so the importance of having these extra courses and the extra knowledge and layering on just gives you that, the intuitiveness, but also that ability to see that in them. So 100% I agree that it's awesome. I call it like building the house, right? You go to the course, you have this foundation, and then you start to add some furniture, and then maybe another add-on, like a game room. And that's what all these continuing education courses do. You're just adding on and building and building and building to create just more of this value within yourself. And the clients really, I know my clients just say they really appreciate how much effort and, I've put into my continuing education as well. So yes, as you said, you start here and then it's continuous, just going on and on and on.
Right. Thank you.
I guess we'll be learning for 30 years, huh, Shelly?
True.
Just like you.
True. Yeah. So what did Len had a comment, advanced beginner, so true. It wasn't till I'd been teaching for 10 years that I finally got it. Yeah. I've had the same experience too. And, I remember when I was first put into a position to be an educator of other people. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what if somebody asks me a question that I don't know the answer to? And of course, now I know that people are going to ask me questions that I don't know the answer to, and I go and find out. And that's similar to what you're saying, Nicole, with your clients coming in. Sometimes they'll come in and they'll say, well, I have this or I have that. And you think, oh gosh, I'm not really sure if I know how to do that. And you said an interesting word that we talk about in Polestar, which is recipe. And we don't teach by recipe. We give guidelines, and we expect students to be able to critically think about or critically reason, not as in being critical, but as being discerning with a plan of, I see this person in front of me. What are the best choices for today? So in the beginning, our curriculum wasn't set up that way. We taught a lot of exercises and we taught a lot of things, but we didn't have some of these steps and plans in place. So we have a screening now, we have our assessment tool, we have the sequencing that we talk about in how you put together a session. And we want everybody learning all of the movement, the apparatus, the different ways to think about it at the same time. And you guys have heard Brent and me talk about the book that we really like, Make It Stick by Peter Brown. And if you take a section of something, one piece, and you just learn about it only, and you learn everything there is to learn about it, and now you go to the next piece and you learn everything there is to that piece and the next and the next, we don't get this interleaving or interweaving of the concepts that really help to make a well-rounded session, but also a well-rounded teacher. So just wanted to bring that into it too. And people ask, well, why don't you just teach the trap table by itself? And why do you do it the way you do it? And it is on purpose to make sure that we are always setting into place these connections, these deep connections about the movements, the apparatus, how are they similar, how are they different, so that when you do have that moment and a difficult client comes in, or you started your whole plan on the reformer and now there are no reformers available, and what are you going to do? That you have these choices, you have these options to fall back on. So good. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the most interesting and valuable courses, not so much necessarily the school, although you can put that in there as well. But what types of courses and information have been the most valuable, or some of the most valuable to you guys? So if you could put that in the chat, that would be interesting to see. I will say, and you guys can probably guess what I will say, and really the only other movement discipline that I've done a lot of, which is gyrotonic. So I started the gyrotonic expansion system training way back in 1998, I think, and we had a few sheets of paper. It wasn't really even a manual explaining the 7 progressions and how to do the gyrotonic work. And I have to say that the fundamentals of that work have really supported me and made me a better Pilates teacher. So thank you, Julio and Gina. And to Angela, my educator, I think it's, it has really changed how I approach movement. And the combination with Pilates has been really cool. What, Andre, and it doesn't have to necessarily be movement based, might be something else.
For me, a course that stands out, I think Lisa's and Hagit's scoliosis course was really one of my favorite courses that I've taken. A lot of information, but it was transformative in a way that my mother has scoliosis, so it helped me kind of help her with her own practice, understand a little bit better why some orientations or some movements might feel super restricted to her, and maybe also removing that idea of she can't do this because she I don't know, there's something wrong, or she's not investing enough time on doing it, and it's really a structural problem in her self that is getting in the way, and accepting that and learning how to maybe adjust or using breath to help her if she's feeling like, I don't know, some tension on some sides of her body. So for me, that course was really one of my favorite ones. Another one that comes to mind is the critical reasoning course that Cole was referring to. I took that course, I think it was last year too. So I gave myself some time to, go in and be a teacher, observe, train the eye, so that when I took the course, I was really able to see things, notice different movements, notice lack of movement. So that one was really good as well. Like both of those have helped me a lot with my own practice, and have had great success in the way I've been treating clients of my
Wonderful.
own.
Yeah. I'm just seeing a couple of the things that are coming in, and some somatic work with Eric Franklin. Some are to everybody and some are panelists. So I'll read a couple off. A couple of people doing different trauma release techniques and training, which, as Nicole brought up, it's not just about the physical body. And we're learning more and more about that as we're looking at mindfulness training, and even the evolution of the ICF model, the International Classification for Function and Disability, has really brought in all of the behavioral, the psychological influences that really play a part in how we move. Are we afraid of moving? What does our society tell us? What is our belief system? So those are some that are in there. There's probably a couple more. Another couple of gyrotonic, Eloda. Yeah, great. Hey, Sarah. Yeah, another Franklin, and connector training. Yeah, connector training is super fun. All right, Marie Jose Bloom and the OOV. Wonderful. Oh, good. All right, Nicole, tell us.
Yeah, so reading over some of these comments, I agree with everybody with the somatic work and all of that is just also wonderful. For me personally, I would say two courses. The first one, over these past 2 years, I've gone through a 2-year NLP, neuro-linguistic programming course, which has been extremely empowering. And that tying into Brent's, critical thinking course and advanced assessment, which I feel like has really touched a lot of that type of work as well. And just helping us understand, or helping me understand, through the Polestar assessment, the PAT, we get this great list of movement assessment. It's wonderful. He's just taking it to the next level. And he's like, hey, look, here's something else you can look for. For example, recently I've started working with a couple of pro baseball players. Well, guess what I've been using? The rotational assessment, the belief system. So all this stuff that I've been able to learn, I can take it, I apply it. It creates all of this value for me and my clients. And I am able to niche myself out into a different space that has just been a really nice investment. And allowed me to look deeper into the work, into the body, into the belief system, into, like you said, Shelly, like perhaps somebody is moving really rigidly, and it might be more in their belief system or a trauma or something that they might not even be aware of. And as practitioners, we get that opportunity to observe and somatically allow them that opportunity, and creating the environment and space for them to feel in their bodies. Which it goes really deep, as you know. But it's a beautiful way to help. I'll just call it help facilitate healing in others.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. And a couple other, some more thumbs up for Hagit and the scoliosis course. Madeline Black, her book Centered is a lovely book for teachers. I've seen a few different physical therapy assistants and physical therapists come in and put some things down about PT and personal training as well. Wonderful. Yeah. All right, good. I wanted to talk a little bit about, and maybe we can help people strategize about how do you choose what, Nicole just chooses because she does everything that, is there and available, to her. Andre a little bit too. And I guess we all are. We're very, the movement pieces are so rich and valuable, and how can we help other people, and how can we stay curious? And also I also feel like it's a little bit of self-care for us as practitioners. We haven't really talked about that piece of it yet, but I think Andre, you mentioned that a little bit in the beginning of just keeping yourself, or maybe when we were chatting about it, just keeping yourself, stimulated and relevant with what's going on. So maybe Nicole, you could talk a little bit about how you're choosing, and also maybe when you're choosing this.
Yeah. So as a studio owner, and I want to say first, yes, I am a studio business owner, but as Pilates instructors, I feel like we're all our individual business owner within ourselves. Mm-hmm. And one of the very best things that I was able to do for myself and my business was create I call it's kind of a filter system based off a system called Profit First. And when I take the income that I come in and I filter it out into different categories, and one of the categories I have is for continuing education. So I already have designated, like, kind of skimming off each month, whatever percentage that goes right into this account. So how I would say to decide, like, what is it that, get really clear on what is it that you really, what's your passion? Like, who do you want to work with? What really lights you up? And then once you've figured that out, then kind of look around and say, okay, well, who do I resonate with? I'm a very kinesthetic person. So I'm a feeler, and what feels right to me. So step one, I would say, get really clear. And then step two, like, create an account. And that's for one, it's going to free you up, because then when something comes around, you're like, oh shoot, I don't have the money to do X, Y, Z. No, you're already going to have it there, because you've already, like you said, self-care. And you've created this fund to say, hey, this fund is for my education. This fund is for my taxes. This fund is for my equipment, whatever it is. So I'd say those are the two main things. Get really clear, and then create a fund that will support that in you and your journey and your continuing education.
Wonderful. Andre, what would you add to that?
Right now, I'm in this approach of, let me just try it myself and allow myself the time to feel it in my body. I have to confess that at the beginning, Pilates was the first movement thing I ever did in my life for professional reasons, right? And I went through that phase of everything has to be Pilates and everything has to be Polestar, and things have changed, things have evolved. I've opened myself to learning about modalities. I started going to yoga classes. I'm now doing this really amazing functional patterns classes here. It's right by my house. And I have to say that, it's been a great experience, because now I'm opening myself up to, okay, I know Pilates. let's incorporate other modalities. Let me first experience them myself. So I do my kind of vetting system where, okay, let's see how they cue, what are they saying, how they choose their exercises. Does this make sense to me? And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll invest on some education here. So that's something that I've been trying for the past 2 years, trying it out myself first. It's a lot more cost effective than just signing up for courses. And then the other one, I think from a business standpoint, like look at your clients, right? Who are you serving? What are their goals? What is their history? What are you solving for them? And can you become better at, at helping them reach their goals by adding more education under your belt? So those two things, like one, I do it for pleasure and just to keep myself active and finding new things. And then the other one is, right, what do my clients need, and what is out there that I can help, like it will serve them in the long run.
Right. And I like the niche word that you use, Nicole. We talk about that, and there was a long time where, to be relevant in the Pilates world, you had to have a niche. What was each group's, ours was certainly the background in rehabilitation and how we can really make Pilates available to every person. And, the first people that I ever taught Pilates to, when, I was working with Brent, and he would say, okay, here's this patient and he has this problem, and I want you to do these 3 exercises exactly this way. Go. And I didn't really have to think too much. And this was before there was a real Polestar training. This was before Polestar really existed. And, it was a lot of on the job and apprenticeship, which is how people used to learn how to do Pilates. Now you can, be trained in, a weekend. I don't know that that's really the best way, but it's possible. At least people are coming to Pilates still. So however they get here, we'll take them, and then hopefully we'll inspire them to do more training. And it's this idea of how do we really meet the needs of our clientele? And I think that is really important, because both of you mentioned it, is who are your clientele? And do you want to expand who you can work with? Are you interested, a lot of people who have kids in, could be elementary school, middle school, high school, could even be college. The schools are looking for people to come in and help out and work with athletes or provide services to the students. In talking about the behavior and psychological work, one of the first iterations that we knew of with Pilates in the schools, way back with Dawn Marie Ikes, who she and her husband went in and did some very basic movement and breathing techniques with these kids. And they had it was, in essence, it was just a short amount of time, and they just learned a few different techniques they could use. And they all reported that on stressful days when I had to take a test, I could do my breathing techniques, I could do this movement. And, so where's your niche, your niche, that you can fit in, and what really inspires you? I think that's something really important. And, also was going to talk a little bit about this idea, and I've seen it, and it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, of people who do a zillion trainings that are, one every month, all these, and really in-depth bodies of work. And they have their certificates on the wall, and they, have all this, but they really haven't embodied it and really taken it to their clients. So make sure, I really want to encourage people, maybe once you've graduated, you don't have to do a lot of continuing education. Just maybe do what you're doing and get clear on that. Then go into some continuing education. But if you're going to call yourself, and I like what you said, Andre, of, sometimes it's just simply for us. I may not even really want to teach this new thing that I'm involved in, but for me, I started doing some yoga at home a number of years ago. I love it. I'm not a yoga teacher. I don't necessarily want to be a yoga teacher, but it was really stimulating to me to, to just change what I was doing just a little bit. And again, that influenced my Pilates teaching. So Nicole, you mentioned this, and maybe you could talk a little bit about just the clients. I think the end users, our clients, they're pretty savvy now.
Yeah, they are. They're very discerning. And what I notice here in Austin is that people, they want quality. And we're a very active community. People play a lot of sports. They play pickleball, do a lot of hiking, cycling, and their main goal is to stay healthy and strong. And they are very intentional. And if they have an injury or they want to prevent, they're discerning, and they want to most certainly reach out and seek out the best they can get for their own selves. And so, like lately, I've had actually quite a few people with knee replacements. Just the way that our population's aging. Maybe I used to teach step. I know there was a lot of bad habits back in the day. Right? There's a lot of things are showing up for people nowadays. Which I recently also took Beth's course on the lower body pathologies. Super helpful. And that in itself, the investment in itself that I whatever I paid into that has paid back 200 times over, because I continuously now, new client, knee replacement, hip replacement, ankle issue. I'm like, I gotcha. And so, and if I don't, I have Beth. I can reach out to her, or I can reach out to my mentors. And like, I don't know it all, but I have people that I can ask. Just like you had mentioned, Shelly, and the trainings as an educator, we don't know it all, but we have this great support system within Polestar that they're just like a text or an email away to say, hey, I've got this person that one of my mentors, Marie in Dallas, like I'm constantly asking her about a case, I'm like, what do you think of this? And she'll get back with me and we'll have this discussion. And I just can't see that. I never had that before in any other training or school. So yes, definitely creating the niche, definitely just recognizing what it is that your community needs and how can you serve them in that, because people are looking for high quality, highly knowledgeable instructors to help them to feel better, be more active, longevity. They're there. We just need to get out there and do our due diligence to like up level our education.
Definitely. Andre, anything to add? Or
yeah, I actually want to talk to Nicole's point of community, and I think I would actually say that being a part of a studio, right, and sharing knowledge with maybe people who've been teaching longer than you, or even, you being there as the person who might know the most in a certain time with somebody who's new is also Con Ed, right? So just participating and observing classes from Beth, who Nicole mentioned, she works at on our studio. And it's just sometimes, I just go there and I sit and I observe what she's doing, and there's always something new to learn, right? Whether it's what types of transitions she's using from one exercise to the other. How is she cueing and keeping people engaged, or if she's working with a private client. But there's always, so that's also, I would consider that also Con Ed, like investing time in sharing with people who have more knowledge than you, or being the person in the room who might be the one that knows the most in that same scenario, and taking the time to explain a concept to somebody, right? So I think that's actually where most of the learning happens, is when you're put in a position where you have to explain why you're doing something, or somebody comes to you with a question and you're like, oh, okay. So now I have to sound like this makes sense. And you've done it forever and you know the reasons, but you can't articulate them. So if you're able to articulate them, then that means, you've actually learned that little concept. At least you've mastered learning objective.
That is so true. And that's that idea of moving past the illusion of knowing. For some reason, that phrase really resonated with me when I heard it, this illusion of knowing. And people will talk about, oh, I reread my manuals, or, oh, I studied really hard. And well, what did you do? Oh, I looked in my manual, I reread it, I watched a video, which is all good. Nothing's wrong with that. But unless you are asked to recall it and kind of regurgitate it to somebody else, that's a wonderful way of really knowing and confirming with yourself that you know it, that you really done it. And that's why, I love that idea of mentoring. And this is why in our courses, and those of you that have been students of mine, and especially when you were brand new students to this work, and again, I've seen a couple of names on the chat of people who are new in our current cohort of the comprehensive series. And right away, people say, oh, well, what about this? And I give my answer, which is, well, it depends. And I usually put the question back to the student or back to anybody. Well, what do you think about that? Because I think as students, sometimes we assume that we don't know anything, and we actually know a lot. And I think it's good to celebrate what you do know and talk about it a little bit, and then be open to the learning then that comes from that. And I ask often questions, because I want there to be even just starting the process of recall. Why are you doing that? I don't know. Let me think about that for a moment, and I can come up with a reason. And I've, many times made, not too many assumptions, hopefully, but, in, talking with students, and I'll say, well, this, I'm looking maybe at some homework, and it's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this? And they'll say, well, no, it does, because of this, because of that, because of that. And I think that, we need to, see in others, especially if you're new to this work, that you actually have a lot of value, have a lot of knowledge already in there. And don't be afraid to say it. And it's also okay at that beginning place. Again, when we are really novices and beginners at something, it's okay to be wrong. At least you took the stab to put something out there, and you thought about it. And the more that you do that, the more that just becomes kind of a regular piece of discussion, almost, of, I don't know, what do you think? Well, I was thinking this. That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. And I think that's so important. And Diana just put in the chat of learning to tell the new trainers that they have fresh eyes, which is such a huge thing, so they don't undersell themselves. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And you notice a lot. And I notice the students in my own courses, I'll say, okay, well, let's just watch this. And I don't really want to know what it is that you're seeing, but do you see something? And they're all, yeah, okay, I see something. I see parts moving, or parts not moving. And so I think that's a good way to go. So other things you guys wanted to bring up about continuing education. I think now more and more people are open to doing continuing education. And I remember quite a long time ago, there was a, kind of a subset of kind of like us who will take, it's like, oh, so-and-so's teaching a course, I'm there. I really want to learn this technique, or I want to learn from this person, or I want to learn from this school to enhance my own learning. But there were a whole lot of people who didn't. And, just again, bringing it out there that, in most professions, it doesn't really matter what it is. In most professions, you are expected to do some sort of continuing professional development. And I love that term, not just continuing education, but personal and professional development. I think that's a cool thing. So who would like to add in a little bit more to that?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to your point, Shelly. I love your approach when you ask people, well, what do you think? That's my favorite thing. And it really allows them to also have their own continuing education. It gives them the autonomy, and it gives our clients the the opportunity to seek out for their own selves. Well, what else can I learn about my body? And maybe, this whole trend with our neuroplasticity and creating all the new neural connections, like we should all be, in my mind, in my model of the world, like seeking out to help our clients. Like, well, what, how do you feel with that? That's great. Let's do and a lot of times my clients will come back and be like, yeah, I read about such and such, and I read about Feldenkrais, and I learned about somatic movement, and I get it. And it's less on us. And it's like, yeah, let's give you the power over your own self, because everybody knows, it's like our body's intuitive. They know what to do. It's just, we need to be reminded, right? Because oftentimes we've been taught, like, we've always, in my world, have always been told what to do. This is what you do. Do this, do this, do this. But giving also the client the opportunity to have the continuing education moments is huge, not just for their own bodies, but in the studies of dementia, there's so many opportunities to allow their growth. So it's to me, it's unlimited. So much unlimited potential in that field.
Yeah. And I learn as a teacher all the time of my clients, not as a teacher trainer, certainly a lot of learning there, but in just teaching clients, my own clients, I've learned so much. They have taught me so much, almost more than courses I've taken, because it really lets me understand exactly what they're going through, how to set up equipment so that it really, it's the best for the situation, for their body. And going back to what I was just thinking about, when I was talking about early on with Brent, is almost everybody I worked with had some sort of pretty significant pathology or trauma. We had amputees. We worked with a whole group of people who, a community group that had suffered different traumatic brain injuries. And every different person came in with a different persona. They were, really excited to be there. Some didn't know that they were there. I mean, we had so many different things. And as a new teacher, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to set up for all these different people. And so I just started to ask them, well, how is this for you? How does this feel? Does it feel supportive? Does it feel challenging? Does it feel good? And learned a huge amount from that. So, and we can have the clients learning about that. It's just like 360 learning. And as a teacher, I learned that same amount from somebody. Andre, other things you'd like to add about education?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had this sense of being a Pilates instructor or a movement practitioner, professional. It comes with a responsibility of making sure that your client is safe or that they're improving, whether it's mentally, physically. And Nicole, you said something that for me is very important, is transferring your knowledge back to the client so that stays with them outside of the classroom, outside of that hour. But with Con Ed, that responsibility is also there, right? Like, this much, you're probably dealing with somebody who's in a lot of pain, or I don't know, whatever it is that's going on with them. You need to make sure that you're bringing your game and you know what you're doing so that you keep them safe, you help them through. And this is not only like going back to pain, like, do you know Pilates, but everything around that person and how that's affecting their mental state, how they might have all the belief systems that Nicole, you mentioned, right? Like understanding how not to feed into that pain, how to manage the way they're expressing about themselves. So I feel like in our responsibility to do what's best for our clients, we have to stay on top of research. We have to always stay curious, always have to invest in our knowledge so that we are better prepared as practitioners to help more people. So
very true.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, it is a huge responsibility. And I don't know that everybody if you think back to when you were first thinking, I'd like to be a Pilates teacher. I don't think that probably many of us, at least, who've been doing it for a while, really understood the hugeness of the opportunity to work with different people. That's pretty wide.
Yeah.
And I take your point on it. I think that is such an important piece. And I was just speaking with Brent a few minutes ago before we started the webinar. We were talking about this idea of when we, like in our courses, we're constantly talking about precautions and contraindications, and knowing that every single person, you could have 100 people with the same diagnosis of something. Each one of them is going to have a different way that they present, a different things that bother them or feel good, and all these different pieces to it. And so, I think it's to your point, Andre, it's really important in the beginning when you are a new teacher. Don't feel like you have to know it all, and you certainly shouldn't be necessarily going out and working with populations of people that have special needs and special concerns that you might not be ready for. You guys have heard Brent tell the story probably a zillion times of he was working with somebody doing feet and straps on the reformer, and she was doing some arcs and circles, and she burst out into tears, and he took her out of the straps and took her into a treatment room and talk to her about what was going on. And if you're a new teacher and that happens, hopefully you have some mentors around you, other people in your studio that can help you process and deal with that, help the client, because I think it is a huge responsibility. I'm really glad you mentioned that. And I just want a couple of other bits in the chat. And Diana mentioned that her growing her toolbox and the necessity to review things, because there is so much that she says, my brain can't hold it all. And it's true. We do need to go back and look at notes and maybe watch a video or reconnect with people that we've studied with in courses, and totally on board with that. And then Birgit, one of our educators in Europe and Germany, said, if learning new methods makes you question what you've learned before. I love that. So, it made me understand and question, and we shouldn't be afraid to question what we know and move on. It's like everything, so much has changed in research in the last, let's just even say 10 years, or maybe even 5 years of, different things with the physical body. If you listened to the webinar a few weeks ago with Carol Davis and all these advances with the work with the fascia and the belief models and all of the, all the different aspects of this has really changed. And I would hope that we are questioning ourselves periodically and changing how we teach, how we work with clients, how we take care of ourselves. I'm hoping that you're all doing that, and don't be afraid to have that moment. And maybe the first time it happens, it's like, oh gosh, I thought I really knew this, but what I'm understanding is this is actually how it is now. That's a wonderful moment. And we want to be having those. We want to be doing that because we don't want to be teaching the same way we were teaching 20 years ago. Certainly not everything. Some, yes. Keep the good and then continue to expand. And that's one of the things when I do teach our transition intensive, and that's our comprehensive course, which is, right into 6 days of training. That's one of the things that I make sure in the very beginning that people, that really understand. It's not to say, like, Nicole, you came in and you've had several different trainings, and not once did I say, oh, well, what you know from Balanced Body or Peak or, what Physical Mind, that's all that. Now you're going to learn Polestar, and this is really what it is. It is a collaboration. You wouldn't be in these courses if you already didn't know what you knew. So you wouldn't even qualify to come into the transition course if you hadn't done and put in all the hours and the training. And so I really want people to, to think about that and think of it as enhancing your skills, not, certainly not putting aside anything that you learned before, to just move on with something new. So just keeping track of the time. We're getting close to the hour. What would you guys like to just finish up with?
Yeah, I would just say to that last thing, most of the time, what ends up happening is validation of what you already know. And, it's like nobody's going to remove all the experience and knowledge that you've invested. It's a collaboration, maybe another way of seeing the same approach, same idea, same principles, but so it's more validation than whatever you learned before. Disregard completely. Like, no, not. That's what I really enjoyed and have seen in your courses. Yeah. So that's it for me.
Nicole?
Just like to add that, one of the commonalities sometimes you'll hear is, well, it's not in your scope of practice, or it's not in my scope of practice. Okay, maybe not right now, but it's perfectly fine to have a bigger scope, right? To increase your scope. And we don't have to stay pigeonholed into one little scope. We can have big scope and create lots of different opportunities of knowledge that all contribute to our one purpose. But to feel as instructor, it's perfectly okay to increase your knowledge, to increase your scope of practice, and to, of course, like refer out when you need to. But just know that our brains are so capable. We're so capable of learning so much. So that's one thing I would just encourage everybody is just think bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's great. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so I think we'll close it up. Thank you, everybody who has participated and put things into the chat. I know I didn't get everything read, but really appreciate when you guys are engaged and ask questions and offer feedback. And please keep doing that. We do have a big conference that you'll see Polestar at. So if you are a physical therapist or a PTA and you happen to come to the CSM conference in San Diego in a couple of weeks, if you're going, please come by the booth and say hi. We'll be there in the exhibit hall. We'll be around the conference. We have our transition intensive coming up here at the Polestar Center in North Carolina, as well as Brent's critical reasoning course. So lots of things coming up, and I hope to see you all there. Nicole and Andre, thank you so much for joining and adding your voice to this. It was really great. And we look forward to seeing all of you very soon, and certainly back here for the next webinar. Thanks, everybody.